Have you ever replayed like what somebody said and then started wondering like if they were talking about you or if it was directed to you? Like maybe it was like maybe like a comment, a tone, or like a look that made you feel like it was kind of personal. So what happens is that when we're triggered and it's like our minds, they start playing and replaying a situation, and the next step usually becomes like personalization. Like we personalize it, like we personally feel that they are talking about us, and we begin assuming somebody else's intentions, like their motives, and like even the meaning of what the conversation actually was without even knowing like what they really meant. And then like psychologists calls this like a cognitive distortion, and where they call it like personalization, where we just personalize everything. It may not even been directly directed toward us, but we kind of feel like it was, and so we start to personalize everything. And then we assume that the intentions or motives or what the meaning was, but we actually don't even know what they meant. We just assumed it. And like I said, the psychologist also calls this like cognitive distortion, because we kind of twirl it, and turn it around to fit the narrative that we think it matches. And so, but the distortion itself is called like the personalization, because we take it and we personalize it. And so it happens when we automatically like interpret different situations as being about us, and it really may not have even been about us at all. And then what that can do is it can easily lead to like unnecessary hurt and misunderstandings and conflicts in relationships. And that's why I did another video about this, is where we need to just pause and try to seek understanding and get some clarity before we react. Yep. And basically just being aware is basically the first step, because you could have a whole scenario in your head that that you didn't replay, like the comment, you didn't like the tone. um because once you have that thought in your mind, it's just like, now I'm about to connect the dots to all this stuff that happened. Next thing you know, it wasn't even personal at all, but everything then crumbled because you snapped off because you thought it was personal. And what's important to note is that like assumptions, it's like they can often create like more hurt than was really intended, or that should have even taken place at all. Because once you assume something and you take off and you go down that rabbit hole, next thing you know, every scenario and every action is based off of that thought process that you have. And so what ends up happening is like you're basically responding to your interpretation of what happened, instead of actually responding to what actually happened, if it even happened at all. And that's why it's important to communicate instead of just assuming and just getting mad and sitting and festering over something and not even having an actual conversation. Because what can happen is, by just sitting and having a conversation, it could resolve a lot of unnecessary pain on both ends. Because if you pop off based off of what you think instead of verifying, that's why I always say seek to understand, talk, have a conversation to understand, instead of just going in being a right fighter. That's why it's important for us to kind of listen and see that the other person's perspective before we just make a whole judgment. Now, if you sit there and you talk to them and your judgment is correct, which we shouldn't prejudge, but if your hunch was correct and you thought, oh, this is probably this, but you know what, I'm gonna wait and see, and it is correct, then you need to act appropriately, based off of what your scenario is. But still, it's important to get clarification and to understand before you just jump off and make those decisions. and start reacting, because not everything that feels personal actually is personal. And on the flip side, if you are a communicator, and you like talking things through, and people, you deal with people who don't even like communicating, or they just rather do the silent treatment until they get over it, that's not healthy. You need to be able to talk through things. You need to actually be able to talk through things, because what that does is make stuff even worse than really what it even needed to be, because nobody's going to sit there and let somebody just keep giving them the silent treatment, and you are a person that likes to communicate, to talk things out, because you're not solving anything just because you gave me the silent treatment and you didn't talk for 4 days, 5 days, 2 days, whatever the time frame may be, a week, 2 weeks, a month. That didn't resolve anything. That just let you sit there and marinate it on all that time over and over and over. That let that person just keep getting mad over and over and over. And then the other person that is a communicator, you're just left sitting there like, what the heck is going on? Why are they mad? You don't even know what's going on. And then they could be have a whole scenario and be mad about something that you didn't even mean the way that they took it, or it didn't even happen the way that they thought it did. So that's why it's important to communicate. And Colossians talks about that in the Bible. Colossians 3:2 says that um, it reminds us to set our minds on things that are above, not on things that are of the earth. So, like, if we sit there and have a godly response, or sit there and try to understand in love and patience and peace and all that, joy, happiness, all that stuff, we sit there and try to gain clarity from that aspect, then it'll kind of have you pausing before you just go in and make those decisions to just say all that stuff. Because once it's out there, you really can't take it back. A person can say they're sorry, or if it's you, you could say you're sorry, but it's still already out there. And now they're having resentment, or you have resentment based off of what they said, and then the situation really wasn't what it was, but then they didn't say all this stuff. Now you have to figure out, did they really mean that? Because what it's a saying about, out of the heart mouth the heart speaks, or something like that. Like, that really was on your heart, because you done held all that in. They held all that in to say that to you, when this really wasn't about that. And so now I heard what you said, so now I have to like take what you said as face value. So see how that can just twirl into something that, whereas if you would have just had a conversation to begin with, you wouldn't have even had to deal with any of that. Or if they would have had a conversation. Sometimes the healthiest thing we could do is pause, take a long breath, just pause long enough to ask yourself this simple question: do I actually know what that meant? Do I actually know what they mean, or what that meant, or am I assuming? Do I have clarification that that's what that meant, or am I assuming? Okay. And that's where you start getting your peace, because it's not worth sitting up here arguing over something that's not even what I said, and you're going all off, and that's not even what I mean. I'm just trying to say this, and you took it as that. So I like quotes, and one quote that I had today is that assumptions, they often create more hurt than the moment itself. Let that sit. Assumptions often create more hurt than the moment itself. Mm-hmm. Yep. So I hope this video helped you. If this is you, or you know someone, or you have dealt with something like this and this touched you, please like and subscribe. And as always, I'm wishing you peace, love, joy, and happiness. Have a great day, guys.